Hey, Steve.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? Good to see you.
I am well. I'm glad you made it. We'll get into a little bit of your backstory in a second. Why you're coming to us from the road location, the mobile office, perhaps. But wanted to say welcome everybody who's sitting around with us today on a Friday afternoon in the summertime. Thanks to Human Resource Executive for having us. Thanks to ADP for sponsoring this conversation. And we're here to chat about employee experience, HR technology, and maybe some other things too, right? Depending on how that goes. But Jason, I think your situation right now, what you're doing, is actually a really good lead-in to some of the content that we talked about and was written about in the recent white paper about improving the employee experience. Because let's just pretend you're an employee today, right? And now you're out on the road doing something that you need to do, right? But you may still need to be checking in, getting some work done, approving some transactions, whatever the case may be. Like the expectations and the demands you would have, or any employee would have for their technology to support them, it's completely been turned on its head probably in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and Steve, I think one of the things that I just want to start with, so thank you for having me and thank you for HR Executive and ADP. Instead of saying something that I have to be doing, it's something that I should be doing, which is out coaching my son's baseball game. So I think one of the things I'd like to just call out based on what you said is that in the now of work and in the work world that we live in today, we have to think about how we can give employees, managers, leaders flexibility to do the things that they want to do while doing their jobs. And I think that, what I'm doing today, sorry, I'm a little bit sunburned after being after the first game here, but, after the, being here doing this, coaching my 13-year-old's baseball all-star game and doing this, the flexibility is what we need to be thinking about when we think about the new employee experience.
Yeah. And I think that some of this is just a natural extension of technology improving to enable us to do things like this really from anywhere in the world. But it's also like what's happened over the last, year and a half, right? And how so many organizations had to rapidly pivot to dramatically different and new ways of working with very little preparation, honestly, or forewarning for the most part. Many did not have great plans in place. And all of a sudden, boom, our business is turned, our employees' lives are turned over on their head. How do we react? How do we support them? And what's the role of technology in kind of making all of these rapid, navigating through this rapid disruption? And I think we've seen some really interesting developments in the last year and a half in that front as well.
And some of it, Steve, is just a mindset. I mean, a year and a half ago, it might not have been accepted me doing this like this, right? I mean, a year and a half ago, it might not be accepted with you doing that in a no shirt and tie, without a tie. Sorry, you have a shirt on, but without a tie.
I did wear a shirt today.
So, when we think about that, we're thinking about how do we become more human at work? And I really think that that's a key going forward in everything that we're thinking about when it comes to employee experience is how do we allow the human to be human?
Yeah.
I think for so long we've been humans outside of work, yet we get into work and we do inhuman things to people. We make them do X, we make them punch in, we monitor them instead of checking in on them.
Yeah.
And in the world we live in today, if anything that the two pandemics taught us in 2020 is that we have to put humanity at the center.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and I'd agree with you. And I think from where I sit, focusing a lot on the HR technology space, primarily on that space, and so many jobs, no matter what the job is, really, so many jobs now are they're done with technology, through technology, supported by technology. Almost no matter what the job is, there are some exceptions, I guess, but there are few and fewer all the time, right? So how do technologies evolve and adapt, right, to sort of embed themselves with that humanity that you're talking about? And I think it's by designing and implementing, thinking about employees first and not administrators, right?
Yeah, I mean, Steve, it truly is. I mean, technology is Play-Doh, and the question is, do I want to make a Steve Boese? Do I want to make a Jason Averbook? Do I want to make a unicorn? Do I want to make a giraffe? Like, what do I want to make? And myself, we all as business leaders need to decide what our now of work looks like and what we're going to mold it into. And the technologies out there today allow us to do lots of things. Technologies, by the way, have not held us back. What's held us back is our own head, our own mindset in a lot of cases. We haven't unlearned a lot of things. So we're finally in that point where we can unlearn. We're finally in that point where we can actually take advantage of the technologies we have, and stop focusing on getting connected like this, but building connection. And I think the more that we focus on that, the more we're going to see the success of HR and work technology going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point. I think that we've had some really good technology for a long time in this space. It's not, it's getting better all the time, right? Just like any kind of technology vertical, right? It continues to improve, but it's been pretty good for quite some time, really, probably the last 10 years or so, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you and I have been doing that. I mean, I just told someone I was doing this for 3 decades, for goodness sakes, and I mean, you and I remember Y2K. I mean, Y2K is kind of when we said, hey, there's going to be this day that all of a sudden people are going to be looking at each other in boxes, and they're going to be working remotely, and they're going to have, a device around their wrist, and we didn't do a lot, and kind of shame on us, Steve, as, people in the industry, for not pushing people harder.
Yeah,
because, all of a sudden 2020 hit, and we found a lot of organizations were struggling. They weren't ready. So I mean, it's been there. And if there's one thing that we could learn from what happened in 2020, is that this is our time to truly prepare our now of work.
Yeah.
Okay. People ask me about the future. I notice I'm saying now of work instead of future of work, Steve. I think it's so hard to predict the future right now. I think every single day it changes. But what's important now in organizations is really where the head should be.
Yeah, I was never a fan, going back years and years. I was never a fan of those think pieces you would see about, trends for 2022, or predictions for the future, or the future work. Only because, and especially was proved right. Nobody at the end of 2019, there was not one piece written by anyone speculating on the future of work that said, you know what I think is going to happen? We're going to have a global pandemic, and all the offices will be closed, all the stores will be closed, because you couldn't predict it. It was so unpredictable. But that was the most meaningful disruption in work, right, in decades, and it was completely unpredictable, right?
Yeah, the prediction that was right, Steve, the prediction that was right is that HR needed to get out of the hands work and into the hearts work. HR needed to get out of the hands work and into the hearts work, because we knew at some point that HR needed to be closer to the employee. HR needed to be there for the employee. They couldn't be focused on the transactional. So that prediction, we've been focusing on for a long time. We didn't actually know what the impetus was going to be and why that was the case. But what 2020 proved to us is that we have to, hit that reset button right now, get out of the hands work, which is that stuff that's repeatable, auditable, and documented that machines are so good at, and allow our HR people to do hearts work.
Yeah.
Which is make sure our employees' experience is as optimal as possible. Sorry to talk over you there.
No, it's great. And I think that's important to note, that some of the evolution in recent years in technology are really, from many providers, are helping to organizations to do just that. You mentioned the transaction, and that was something I talked about in the white paper that we contributed to. That was the basis for this conversation. But I've seen this for a while now, right? Where for so long, the focus of HR systems, even systems we called employee self-service systems, right, was simply about getting a transaction processed and a field in a database updated correctly and on time, which is an important thing, right, depending on what that update is. But that's it, right? And it wasn't really designed around, okay, let's say that is a job change for an employee, maybe a promotion, say, for this employee, right? So what? Okay, we got the position field in the HRIS updated properly. Great, right? But how about helping that employee with resources, tools, mentors, right? Best practices on navigating that journey that they're making to a new role in the organization, maybe their first, say, managerial role, and helping them succeed in that role. That's what's important to the employee, not that the record in the database got updated, right? And so that's,
Steve, and Steve, I think that we've learned a lot. I mean, you were at a vendor, I was at a vendor, we've all been at vendors. What did we develop? We developed bare naked transactions. and just put them out to employees. Like, we didn't talk about journeys. We didn't talk about like, oh, how's the employee going to feel doing this? Like, we didn't use that language. So the world we live in today, what people have to realize is that unless the HR organization adapts, people aren't going to adopt.
Yeah.
And it's such a key point, because as long as we have business partners, as long as we have HR people that will coddle the employee and not design for them, not ensure that they're using the tools, guess what? HR is always going to be in the hands work. And then guess who we're going to blame? The technology.
Yeah.
It's not the technology any longer. It's us. We have to change our mindset, and we have to adapt so that our employees will adopt.
Yeah, and I think in some ways, some of the early technology deployments actually hurt HR a little bit, right? Because they had very little actual meaningful value to employees other than processing transactions and making database updates for wherever it was, a benefit change, a change of address, a tax withholding, whatever it is, whatever the common self-service things were. I probably spent 8 years trying to fight people about, hey, this is HR's job. You just made me do it. Now I've got to do your job. You stink, HR, right? Because those early tools were not providing those higher value add, that humanity, right? That experience to the employees that they wanted, right? It was just shunting work off to them. And I think we set back probably a lot of progress, maybe that could have been made a little bit sooner, I think.
Yeah, Steve, another big area just around that, I'll just state, and one of the big reasons that, that I spend my whole life focusing on deployment and not implementation, is because, we still, when we get into implementation, we still do something like roll out this thing called minimum viable product.
Mm-hmm.
No employee, no manager, no leader wants a minimum viable product. Like, that's stupid talk. Like, they want a minimum lovable product. Like, we all realize this every single day. When we download an app from the App Store, if it's minimal viable, what do? We like, this thing's stupid, and we delete it. We have to change that focus. And it might be minimum viable to the HR function, because guess what? We'll make them work extra time and they'll deal with it. But if it's minimum viable to the employee, they're not going to use it. And once they don't use it and leave and struggle, it's really hard to get them back. So we have to change that mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. You mentioned like the App Store analogy, and this is one we've been talking about for a while as well, right? The really rapid and incredible advances in any kind of personal technology you can think of, and then largely, the mobile revolution too, right? Starting in 07-ish, right? That's changed what we think about as people, and then certainly as employees, what we think about when we think about tools to make our lives better, and what we expect from them, what we demand from them. And as you said, when we're ready to say, this is not for me, this is not helping me one bit, I'm out, right? There's the technologies. You make a good analogy a lot, Jason. I've heard you say this, like it's 2021 outside in the world, but when you go back inside to your workplace, it's 2004 again or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever think. I mean, thanks for calling that out, Steve. It's 2021 outside of work. What year does it feel like inside?
Yeah,
and I always use the example, like, you search on the portal. If I go on Google right now and search for where I am, I'm in Rochester, Minnesota. Home of Mayo Clinic. But if I go and search for I'm having a baby on my portal at work, what do I find? In often cases, I don't find anything. But I have to type in, I'm having a dependent.
Right. Life event.
That's not employee speak. That's HR speak. So that goes back to design. And how do you design for the empty chair? And realize that the empty chair is the employee, manager, and leader whose job, you're trying to make their job better. But that's different, Steve. I mean, when you and I were writing technology, and at least I'll speak for myself, I'm not going to speak for you. I was more worried about, this has to work for HR. And by the way, the secondary audience was the employee.
Yeah.
And by the way, that was what back in the America Online days, when people dialed in via modem, you got, and then you got to download a Java app, and hey, I didn't care that the employee experience sucked for the employee, as long as something benefited me in HR. That mindset has completely shifted.
Yeah, and I think, and it does take time, right? So things kind of, technology disruptions come in waves, right? And so that first big wave in HR tech that we've been alluding to some is just getting all that paper, right, digitized, right, and automated in some fashion, right? But and that we were knocking it a little bit because it was not very employee centric, not a great employee experience, not designed for employees, which is all true. But it was that first critical step. That step had to be made before we could get to where we're at now, right, in 2021, and what some of the leading providers are doing.
Yeah, and I think as long as the expectation's set, one of the things we like to say is that there's a difference between technology transition and digital transformation. Transition is just moving from one technology to another, or moving from paper to technology, but doing the same thing.
Yep.
It's a transition from one to the other. Transformation is changing how work happens. And, when people go out and buy a new piece of technology and all of a sudden expect it's going to change work, but they do the same thing they were doing before, they're like, this didn't change anything.
Yeah.
Of course it did.
Yeah, there was, and there still is, I think, there remains a lot of people like what they understand, right? And so I'll say this too, like I think some of these problems and challenges we've had with technology fall to the providers of the technology themselves, but a lot of it also happens inside organizations too, Jason. I'm sure you talk to organizations all the time who maybe they say that they want to change, or maybe they want to transform. They're interested in how technology can help them transformation, but then you'll dig a little deeper and you'll find they don't really want to change too much at all. They just rather maybe put a finer, shine of polish on what they're doing and maybe put it in a new system, but continue the way they were working. And that doesn't really make much of a difference. That's
why measures of success are so important. Like if your measure of success is go live, cool, go live. If your measure of success is changing work or changing the role of the business partner or do whatever it is, then cool. But you have to set a measure of success that makes sense. You have to set a vision that makes sense. And if you don't do that, and you say, oh, guess what? We're going to do phase 1 now, and then we'll get to phase 2 and it'll get better, or phase 3 will get better. We all watch how that happens. It doesn't work. The other thing, just Steve, really quickly about what you said, is that we work with way too many organizations that think technology is going to change employee experience on its own.
That's a good point.
And we in HR have this history of working in these things called centers of excellence. And in a center of excellence, most centers of excellence own strategy, policy, and delivery. And if every COE owns delivery, it's never going to feel the same to the employee.
Right.
Like I have one employee with 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 brain and 1 heart. But if recruiting brands things one way, talent brands things another way, payroll brands things another way, the service desk brands things another way, guess what? The employees are going to get lost.
Yeah.
Or if everyone's making their own technology decisions, that's not a employee experience that's lovable. And in order for that to change, the function has to change.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that organizations, it's a partnership, really, right? If you're talking about true transformation, right, which is very, very, especially in a large organization, one that's been around for a long time, particularly, talk about true transformation, it's got to be that partnership between that organization and whatever providers that they're engaging with. Because as you said, the problem is generally not the technology. And I'd say in 2021, it's almost never the technology, right? I mean, I see software demos all year long, pretty much. I'm right in the middle of it right now for our top HR products of the year for 2021 process. And I saw 5 fantastic solutions this week, probably all really good design, solve great problems, effective, look good, look cool. But that's just right. If the organization's not willing to do the kind of hard work that they need to do to change the way they maybe are thinking about employee experience, and it's just shiny technology and it won't really make that much of a difference.
I mean, Steve, there's such great tools today. Like it actually makes me, I start to get a little passionate about this. Like there's such great tools today to measure how people are feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's, and like ways to help managers and leaders know how their employees are in a time where they need to. It's everyone's fragile right now. Everyone is agile right now, and we need to be taking their temperature constantly. But if those tools that you're looking at, which I can almost predict what some of them are seen as HR tools, is an employee going to be honest to an HR tool? No. An employee is going to be honest to a tool that they feel helps them and helps their business and helps their manager and leader.
Yeah.
So these tools are no longer tools that can just be rolled out by HR and say, "Oh, trust us. HR is not going to, look at the data." Like if I tell a tool rolled out by HR that I'm having, a bad day, what's HR going to do? Like the alarms are going to go off and, hey, that manager's in trouble. No, that's not what we need. We need to be able to make sure that manager understands that Steve is having a hard time right now for whatever reason, personal, professional, this whole concept of work-life, blah, blah, blah. It's all one. We're the same person outside of work and inside of work. And it's, how does Steve feel right now? And I need to be able to create a safe space to be able to do that. That's not dictated by a dumb HR policy.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And the tools are there. I mean, the tools, we spent the better part of the last year and a half. I won't say the specific name of the software, but even in our small organization that I'm a part of, I get a weekly check-in, right? That says, "Hey, how are you feeling this week? Did you get things done?" Or whatever the questions were. They vary a little bit, but it took me 5 minutes. Now, again, I'm doing it more just as a person who kind of researches the HR tech space, but the truth is, an organization could use a tool like that and actually have meaningful conversations with employees when they need them, if they're willing to do it, as you said.
I mean, what you just said is so important, Steve. It's if you're willing to do it. And the number of people they're going to say, "What tool? What tool? What tool? What tool?" Right. It actually makes no difference what tool. Like if you think about the airport, you walk out of a bathroom at the airport and there's, the smiley faces, green, yellow, red. And how was your experience? Which is weird that you're touching things when you leave the bathroom to begin with. But that's a different discussion. But if someone doesn't act on that stuff, why am I doing it?
Yeah, and you're right. It could be anything. One of my favorite stories from way back when, like 10, 12 years ago, maybe more, before there were these kind of pulse survey tools. It was a small consulting office. This was like an office-centric kind of culture back then. They weren't working from home or anything. 30 people maybe in the office. And the guy who owned the firm set up 3 garbage cans by the door as he walked away. The one garbage can was full of tennis balls. The other 2 garbage cans, one said "bad day," the other one said "good day." And so when you grabbed the tennis balls, you left the office that day and you deposited a ball in the right can, bad day or good day. It was very binary. You just bad day or good day. There was no middle ground.
But what's so interesting is if people if they didn't pay attention to it, let's say everyone put the ball in the bad day bucket and we didn't do anything, eventually no one would do it. And that's what we're having with this survey fatigue.
Yeah. And the second part of the story was they did. So that someone then had the job of the next morning when he or she came in to tally up the balls and then reset the whole little system. And they would publish it. Like they put it up on the board, but they'd also send an email out to everybody. And then the reason I know the story was the gentleman was presenting about it. And he said, all of a sudden, I saw the trend, right? More bad days, more bad days, more bad days. And so I had to start figuring out why and make some changes and get into the root causes, right? So it was a great example. But the point being, you don't need any technology to do that. This guy had 3 cans in a pile full of tennis balls, and he could figure it out, right, for himself.
And probably also, you probably have the technology already, and you're probably just not doing it because it's not in the mindset of the org.
Yeah. I guess the last thing maybe, Jason, before we wrap it up, and we let you get back to is it the sidelines? Do we call it? No, the foul lines, not the sidelines. Get back to the foul lines and monitor the next day. The field, yeah. Any 1 or 2 things you're looking forward to sort of the second part of the year, whether just that you're seeing in the industry or the space, or maybe some of what, not naming names, of course, but what some organizations are doing that you're working with to really kind of move the needle a little bit in a positive way? Is anything that's got you kind of excited for the latter half of this year?
So there's 2 big things to me that are, I'm not sure excited is the right word. Now that you said excited, I have to think about it. But no, I'm just kidding. No, the first thing is that we have to realize that this pandemic, the pandemics, the public health pandemic, as well as the social justice pandemic, those aren't over.
Right.
Okay. And while we in the United States might be at a period where we're feeling pretty good about our situation, like we need to realize that our brethren around the world are still in lots of hurt. Okay. And as most organizations being global, we need to keep that in mind, because it can come across very tone deaf when all of a sudden we say, hey, we're returning to work, and let's return to work, but yet we're still burying thousands of people around the world. It's really, really important to realize that we have to be human more than ever right now. The second thing is that we've been fish out of water for 18 months. And that now all of a sudden you don't just put us back in the water and say, okay, that was just a little experiment. Now we're back. Like
nothing happened, right?
Yeah. Work has changed. Workers have changed. Business have changed. Times changed. And most importantly, humans have changed.
Yeah.
And what's important to them is different than it was before. So you have to be so aware of the situation right now and say, based on where we are and what our goals are for the rest of this year and early 22, what are the things I should be doing? Okay. But that has me excited, Steve, but it also has me nervous.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm nervous is because if we go back to the way we were, we in the HR profession have wasted the biggest opportunity in our lives to finally do what we've been talking about for 20 years, which is to make the profession a profession for people.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Jason. That's it's certainly important that to think that we could just kind of flip the switch and go back to January of 2020 all over again. It's not. I think about this a lot when I read about organization XYZ. Oh, this remote work was just an aberration. I'm dragging everybody back into the office, and I'm thinking, boy, you didn't learn a thing. You didn't nothing, right? And so, hopefully,
Steve, along that line, for goodness sake, stop calling it return to work.
Oh, I know.
Everyone's been working.
I know. This is a little bit of an aside, but I read an article in a tech blog about Microsoft, who is just announced bonuses to all their staff, right? Like a one-time bonus. And in the article who was covering the story, and I'm not saying Microsoft used this terminology, but the article I read about it referred to the bonuses like 3 times as quote unquote gifts. Microsoft was gifting the employees this money. And I was enraged. I'm thinking, those aren't gifts. People have worked through this pandemic. Microsoft's revenue and profits are probably record high, right? These are not gifts. These are people earn that. I got out of my mind. So anyway, that was just a small aside. But
I completely agree with you. I mean, it's really important to understand that work has been harder during this than before. It's not like we're up now. It's time to return to work.
Yeah, that's honestly, we could do a whole nother hour probably just on that. Yeah. Maybe we should. Maybe HRE will have us back to do a conversation about those transitions and how they're going to be in navigating those. So, but Jason, I want to say thank you for taking time away from the ball field and joining us on the HRE Q&A today. It's good to see you.
I cannot wait to see you in Las Vegas.
That's right. September 28th through October 1st, HR Tech Las Vegas. You'll be hearing plenty more about that as well. And you can follow HR Executive for all the updates on HR Tech as well. So, all right, Jason, good luck. Good luck to you. Good luck to your son in the next ball game.
Thank you so much. Good talking to you.
All right. Good to see you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next time on the next Human Resource Executive Q&A. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Take care.